Well, the big breaking story at this hour, we're waiting for the Finance Minister to speak on what transpired at the meeting of the GST Council today. What we are given to understand is that there has been no breakthrough or no final decision as far as the GST rate structure itself is concerned. Consensus has not been reached on the GST rate structure. We are now going to see the GST Council meeting once again, but that is going to be in November, in the first week of November is what we're given to understand. It's not likely to meet tomorrow, which is what was being proposed. As we've been telling you, there seems to now be a move towards the imposition of a cess on luxury goods and luxury items to try and fund the guaranteed compensation to states. That seems to be the preferred option or the preferred route that the government is keen on taking. That is a matter that's being discussed and debated, and as is very clear, and our team of reporters has been bringing us those updates, we are headed into a multiple rate structure starting at about 4% for gold all the way up to 26%, which then becomes the peak rate or becomes the rate as far as the luxury items are concerned. What is going to be important to note is what category comes under the 12% bracket, what falls under 18%, and what makes it to 26%, and how the cess is going to be designed. Listen in.
Some of the issues have been sorted out yesterday, and today we had two very important issues. The first issue related to the different rates of tax structure. And on the rates of tax structure also depend on the question to be addressed, which is the source of funds on basis of which the compensation to the losing states will be funded. On this issue, we have virtually converged towards a consensus. But till such time a formal decision is taken, because the officers of the state and the center have to work out the implications of that consensus. As of today, I'll only say that we have converged towards a consensus. The formal announcement of that, after working out the technical details, will be made in the next meeting itself. Once that issue is decided, a decision on the rate structure then will become easier, because whether the compensation is to be funded out of the rate structure itself or out of some special cess or out of any other sources. Once this question is answered, then the rate structure can be determined independently. A large part of the discussion in the morning session was concerned with this first question. We have also discussed for some reasonable period of time the rate structure, and then it was decided that in the next meeting we would finalize the rate structure depending on the formal announcement of the connected question which I have mentioned. In the evening, we started a discussion on the issue of dual control and division of authority with regard to assessments. The underlying principle which has been accepted is that one assessee would be assessed only by one authority. That's the advantage of the GST. So whom will the center assess and whom will the state assess, and how that bifurcation will take place depends on how the dual authority is managed. Some presentations have been made by officers of the central government, as also an alternative presentation by officers of the state governments. The West Bengal Finance Minister also presented a set of statistics. And those statistics have now to be updated as of today because some of the statistics that we had become old. Some of the data till 31st December 2015 was presented, and therefore it was decided that we must have up-to-date data. The discussion of the two items is continuing. It is still inconclusive, and the next fourth meeting of the GST Council will be held on the 3rd and 4th of November at New Delhi, which these two carried over items will be discussed and hopefully a decision taken. Thereafter, the only question which will remain will be the draft legislations. Those draft legislations can be discussed only after all the issues are settled. And these two issues are the ones which are remaining a settlement. So once we are able to settle them on 3rd and 4th, if we hopefully are able to do that, then the next item on the agenda, which is the draft legislations, will be taken up in the 5th meeting, which is tentatively scheduled for 9th and 10th of November. That's all I have to say. Thank you. भाई आज इस पे पूछो यार.
So broadly, what was the view of the states in terms of the proposals that the centre has made in terms of the rate structure, and also in terms of the cess that has been proposed so far to compensate them?
I have already given you a one-sentence indication on with regard to your second question that we have almost converged towards a consensus. And therefore, once we are able to formally take that decision, it will only be appropriate for me to comment on the rate structure thereafter.
So can I just ask, so would it be a cess that we use to fund the compensation, or it could be some other thing?
About various options are there, but there is a larger convergence, and since the technical details and its feasibility is to be worked out, it's only thereafter that a formal decision will be taken.
एक कुछ चर्चा में ये था कि 4 या 5 साल आपके लेफ्ट में चर्चा में ये था कि 4 टैक्स स्लैब लेके हम स्ट्रक्चर प्रपोज कर राज्यों के सामने एक 5वां स्लैब भी रहेगा गोल्ड में प्रेशियस मेटल के लिए, तो इन सब में यही टैक्स स्ट्रक्चर पर सहमति बनी है, कुछ अलग फॉर्मूला भी इस पर विचार किया जाए?
देखिए, ऐसा है कि टैक्स स्ट्रक्चर की फॉर्मल डिसीजन हम पहला जो प्रश्न है उसके बाद लेंगे. आप एक चीज समझ लीजिए कि स्लैब्स कम से कम हो, ये एक अच्छा तर्क है, लेकिन उस तर्क को बरकरार रखने के लिए या राजस्व हम खो बैठे या बहुत अधिक लगा दें टैक्स, दोनों उपयुक्त नहीं है. तो अभी जो ड्राफ्ट प्रपोजल दिया है ये फाइनल नहीं है, हो स्वाभाविक है कि इसमें बहुत बदलाव आएगा, लेकिन उसमें प्रयास ये है कि जो मौजूदा टैक्सेशन स्थिति है, जितनी लायबिलिटी टैक्स पेयर पे है, उसको उसके नजदीक ब्रैकेट के अंदर फिट किया जाए. उदाहरण, जो जीरो रेटेड आइटम्स हैं वो जीरो रहे, जो 3 और 6% के बीच में हैं वो 6% वाले स्लैब में फिट हो जाएं, जो 3 और 9% तक के हैं. उससे ऊपर वाला जो टैक्सेशन के आइटम्स हैं वो 12% में फिट हो जाएं. अब जो व्यक्ति आज 11 या 13% टैक्स देता है, जिसको 12 में डाल रहे हैं जिस कमोडिटी पे, उसको 18 कर दिया जाए केवल यूनिफॉर्मिटी के लिए, तो वो बर्डन बढ़ जाएगा. तो इसलिए पहले लगता था कि स्टैंडर्ड रेट 18 हो, आज लो स्लैब 6 का और 2 स्टैंडर्ड रेट हैं 12 और 18, जिससे कि राजस्व भी बना रहे और टैक्स पेयर पे लायबिलिटी भी सीमित रहे।
दो रेट है, एक गुड्स के लिए होंगे और एक सर्विसेज के लिए होंगे, जो स्टैंडर्ड रेट की बात
नहीं 18 में सर्विस भी आ सकती है और गुड्स भी आ सकते हैं।
और जो सर्विस टैक्स में अवेटमेंट होता है उसका क्या होगा सर?
देखिए वो प्रोसेस सर्विस टैक्स का चलता रहेगा अलग से।
Well, that is the finance minister there saying that they have almost arrived at convergence, at least as far as some issues are concerned, but there is no decision yet on the final rate structure. A broad proposal, as we've been putting the details out through the day and, of course, last night on CNBC-TV18, give you a sense of what the GST Council is taking forward. Joining us to discuss what we've heard from the finance minister so far, Sachin Menon of KPMG, Hari Shankar of EY, and Prateek Jain is also with us. We'll also be joined by Nihal Kothari, Executive Director, Khaitan and Company, and Mohandas Pai is also with us. Hari, let me come to you first. This is along the lines of what we've been reporting. No decision yet on the final rate structure. They're hoping to first get clarity on whether or not they should use the cess route for a compensation fund. But that is what it seems to be headed towards if you pick up on what the finance minister was saying.
Well, my first reaction is one more week to decide on this is a good outcome. I would say it needs deliberation. But having said that, you're right. From what I've heard from the press conference sound bites of the finance minister, it appears that cess is still very much on the table. The question is the quantum and hence the sensitivity analysis of the revenue numbers to protect revenue. My personal view is cess may not be a great idea, but that's still very much on the table. But the fact that they will have one more week to deliberate and think about it is good, because then you will come with a little better outcome than otherwise what would have happened today. So we'll have to wait and watch what happens on 4th and 5th. But cess is very much on the table.
Okay, Prateek, you were here with us last night as well, and you've now heard the finance minister. Yesterday, we heard the state finance ministers talking about the possibility of a cess being imposed, and we understand the centre is likely to exercise its powers under Article 271 to try and levy a cess. No final decision yet, but the rate structure will also depend on that possibility. Your first thoughts on what you've heard so far?
No, I echo what Hari is saying. I mean, I think we are taking one step forward and two steps back. I don't think cess is a good idea at all. And there are multiple reasons. We discussed some of that yesterday. Lead to cascading of tax. There is also, I heard that the idea is that 26% and the difference between the existing rate would be the cess. That would mean that different products will have cess at a different rate. Right, and from 2009, the government has been saying that all cesses and surcharges will get subsumed. And recently, when the FAQ document was issued by the government, that also said the same. So, in that sense, I think if cess continues, the industry will be very, very disappointed. And I just hope that over the next few days, when they are taking time out and kind of discussing the rate structure again, when they come back, they move away from cess and maybe look at increasing the 26% to, let's say, 28 or 30 rather than having the cess. I mean, cess I don't think is a good idea at all.
Okay, Mohandas Pai, how disappointed will industry be if that is the final decision to go through with the cess?
I think the cess is a very bad idea, Shireen, for a very simple reason. It complicates the entire matter, puts in another level of taxation. 26% is a reasonable thing, except for alcohol and cigarettes, which may require a different thing. SUVs and so-called luxury goods, I don't know what is luxury. Remember, we are a country where an AC was luxury at one point of time, a fridge was a luxury at one point of time. I think the government of India should take a bold step, like Vijay Kelkar has said, make a grand bargain, create a kitty of 1 lakh crore through borrowing over and above the fiscal deficit and say we will compensate you, we will stand guaranteed to the states for the next 5 years as per a compensation policy. Look at it for 2 years till everything settles down and then think of increasing any rates. Because the most important thing today is to improve productivity in this country, reduce the multiplicative taxes and make sure industry gets the benefit. And for 2 years, if this means that you have to borrow an additional 2 lakh crores, 1 lakh crores a year above the fiscal fiscal deficit, you stand up and do it, create a kitty and give it as a grand bargain. Why do this cess? Why mess it up? Why have multiplicity just to evade your responsibility? Because you have an extra borrowing, it doesn't matter.
I don't know if the grand bargain is going to fly, Mr. Pai.
It's not too big for this economy. Don't create this mess.
Okay, don't create this mess, but let's just listen into the Finance Minister of Kerala, because he's been giving us updates on what has been transpiring inside those GST Council meetings. Let's listen in.
CNBC-TV18. So firstly, what are the sticky issues? Why was it that the rates could not be concluded today?
Because by the time we finished discussion on dual control and also the compensation, the mobilization of resources for compensation, that it took full 2 days of discussion. Therefore, there was no sufficient time for discussing the rates.
So do you think November 22 is achievable to close all these sticky agendas and especially the rates?
Yes, rates I think will be clinched by 10th.
Okay, so what was the state's view? There are talks that states just could not agree with the rates. States still want some time to adjust and see and do the math on their own. What was the view?
Yes, we wanted to examine it more closely. Now the approach is whatever excise and VAT, total tax on commodity. The commodities will be classified accordingly, and they would be put into the rate at a level nearer to existing rate. But VAT rate is 5% on the lower side now. There are some 200 commodities on which there is no excise, but there is a VAT tax of 5%.
Very true.
It is proposed they would be raised to 6%. Well, I don't think it would be good to do that. Many of them are necessities. At the same time, the tax rate on consumer durables is above 30%. Some of them as high as 48%. There is no sense in reducing them to say 26%. So the rate structure is something which needs a lot of fine-tuning.
So what about the 26%? Do you think 26% is reasonable of the 40%?
26% will have to go up, because no business house has said they are going to pass on to the consumer the reduction in the tax burden. In that case, there is no point in reducing the tax and reducing the revenue and hiking up the compensation. No.
So what about the issue of dual control? What happened on that?
Dual control, the model suggested, I feel, are very too complicated. A simple one would be the states look into service payers and goods payers who are below turnover of 1.5 crores rupees. And above 1.5 crore rupees, there are larger taxpayers that can be dual control, cross empowerment. Well, but we suddenly realized that the numbers that were being talked about had a lot of problems with them. And therefore, the discussion was inconclusive. We will be taking it up on 3rd.
So broadly, no consensus on a lot of sticky issues like rates, like the dual control and the compensation.
Compensation more or less completed. Some more money has to be found. The Union Finance Minister has promised to look into that aspect. But other two issues, there has been no consensus.
Thank you so much, sir.
And that is the word coming into the Kerala Finance Minister. Mohandas Pai, let me get you to comment first. As you just heard the Kerala Finance Minister saying, on the issue of compensation, there has been convergence because the Finance Minister has promised to find the money. Where is the Finance Minister going to find the money from? Our sources tell us, and these are highly placed sources, that there is virtual consensus on the imposition of a cess to compensate states. A cess is a better mechanism of compensating states than an increase in tax rate. That seems to be the government's position. Mohandas Pai.
I think the cess is a very bad idea. It is a substitute for tax. You don't know whether your collections will go up. Collections will go up. Collections will go up. Everybody says it'll go up by 1 to 2% of GDP. The fear of states not getting compensated is gone because the constitutional guarantee. And the finance minister, in my view, should borrow more, create a kitty by borrowing. Why put a cess when you don't know? Wait for a year. Industry should come on. Industry should feel that costs are coming down, productivity will come, the chain will be complete. It'll take 1 or 2 years for everything to play out, to give you an idea what exactly is happening. By creating a cess, creating a multiplicity of everything else, you're going to hurt industrial growth. And the idea that this will not be passed on to consumers in a competitive environment is totally wrong. It'll all be passed on to consumers. We can easily test it out over maybe 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters. Let us take a bold measure, simplify, have as less ranges as possible, create a kitty, give it to the states, take a bold step, keep it above the fiscal deficit, and stop this cess business. And don't confuse the whole issue.
Well, they're not stopping this cess business anytime soon. In fact, Nihal Singh, let me bring you in on this conversation because, again, information that we're getting from highly placed sources suggests that the entire proceeds from the compensation cess will go to states governments. As the compensation liability comes down, this could be surplus revenue, and the compensation cess may be imposed for a period of 5 years. Remember, 5 years is what the centre has guaranteed in terms of making good the revenue loss to states. How would you respond to that? And we are also given to understand that perhaps the 26,000 crore rupees that will come by way of the energy cess will also go towards compensating states.
Yeah, I think the compensation has been already taken care of as far as the states are concerned, and therefore the multiplicity of the rates which is being contemplated is going to create a major problem in actual administration and also litigation, because there will be classification issues. Apart from that, the whole objective of simplified tax structure will go away. So therefore, that multiplicity of rate should be avoided as far as possible. And after about a year of deliberation in the empowered committee, they came out with the first discussion paper where very clearly there were 2 rate structure, and all states have agreed at that point in time also. So therefore, this multiplicity of rate is coming out of the fear or the government anxiety that there should be not an inflationary impact at all, and having a reference point of today's rate structure without taking into account that there will be an increase in the revenue because of the base will increase and also compliance will increase. But if you complicate the system by having multiple rates, then the even compliance will get affected. So that is one major concern about this entire rate structure. As far as cess is concerned, if it is not actually coming into tradable cycle, it means that it is not actually affecting the cascading effect of the tax and only at a final stage of like say sin goods or others, then I don't think it is going to make any material difference rather than having a multiple rate structure. That will be better idea, but it should not create a base that there will be multiple cess later on. So if this,
Let me also bring in Sachin. Sachin, do you share the anxiety that Nihal Singh was just talking about, and the rest of our panel has also sort of expressed that concern, on the multiplicity of rate structures leading to more complication, perhaps even litigation, and the tendency to push more items perhaps in the 26% bracket?
Well, I think that we are going backwards now. It is a retrograde step to undermine the credibility of GST, which has been understood by the public so far. We are actually distorting the structure by bringing a altogether unacceptable method of levying cess. We have said that we will, under GST, we will abolish all the cesses, and then we are bringing new cess. Now, if the intention of the government is to collect enough revenue to compensate the state, then without levying the cess, government will be in a position to collect the money, because the income tax collection itself...
Sachin, sorry, I'm afraid I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. We've got the Finance Minister of... we've got Mr. Pandiyarajan from Tamil Nadu, the representative of Tamil Nadu, the GST Council. Let's just listen in.
Yeah, just exactly
Yeah,
1 minute,
yeah,
boss,
yeah.
please.
Sir.
Yeah, please.
So what happened today? What were the issues where states were adamant, and what was Tamil Nadu's view?
There was no adamancy of any sorts. The last 2 days have gone quite well. There's been a considerable exchange of views, and what has been frozen is the principles of compensation and the vehicle for compensation. But what has not been frozen are the rates. They made a proposal. We've given our views. There are lots of data which has been shared. There are considerable work which they are likely to do, the team which is anchoring this whole thing. For the first time, we have a GST Council have its own secretariat. There's a separate person with a separate identity, which I think will behave very well for this whole thing. And in my view, if it does go in the same manner of transparency and fiscal equality, I see that GST could actually proved to be what it was destined to be, which is that one nation, one tax kind of a thing. And some distance to go. No one has been adamant as far as these 2 days is concerned. There's a spirit of camaraderie which was prevailing. And we believe that as long distance to cover before we arrive at the rates.
So when you talk of long distance to arrive at the rates, do you want some more flexibility in the rates? States, were they happy with the rate structure which was given yesterday, or you want some more clarity? What is it?
See, the key issue, more than the rates, it is the administration. Frankly, the key challenge for us is all the states put together have about 272,000 people, while the center has some 82,000 people. So who will be owning which piece of the assessees is the key challenge, which I think will get addressed in the next meeting. And in my view, if it goes with the same spirit of give and take, we could have something very good.
Are you okay with the cess part of it?
Cess is the vehicle I mentioned for compensation. It's one of the choices which is getting evaluated. It may not be the only choice. So as of now, we are happy. As far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, we wanted certain transparency as to what will be the principles which determine the compensation, what will be the vehicle for compensation. They propose something which we are happy with. But it still doesn't mean that we will get the compensation what we want. The nitty-gritty is the numbers need to be worked out.
Thank you so much, sir.
Well, that is the representative of Tamil Nadu, Mr. Pandya Rajan, speaking with our colleague Timsy. But Sachin, I had interrupted you. You were talking about how this is a step backwards and it's actually distorting the very idea of a GST. As we just heard Mr. Pandya Rajan there saying that cess is certainly an option that is being considered. It may not be the only option, but it's certainly an option that is being considered at this point in time. This is... What do you think has transpired? Because this was not the structure that was being discussed till even about a week or 10 days ago. Something seems to have changed over the past fortnight or so.
Well, in my view, the cess is not required because government otherwise also will, central government otherwise also will collect the money to compensate the state through increased collection of income tax. Under the GST regime, it is difficult for any business to operate without a registration, without disclosing any of the transaction of supply, be it service or be it goods. The ability to have any black economy is considerably going down. And this means that government will collect more than what they require for compensating the states through the increased income tax collection. So therefore, the justification to say that the cess is levied for the purpose of generating revenue perhaps may not required. Even otherwise, government would collect more money. And by bringing this kind of new surprises, you're rather undermining the trust of the people in GST and what is supposed to be the best tax system. We are coloring it, we are distorting it, and this may not go down well with the industry and the people.
Hari, would you share that view that something seems to have changed over the past fortnight or so? Because this is not something that was being considered, or at least we didn't know that this was on the table and was being considered. Do you believe that this is now going to have serious implications and industry? This will have a backlash from industry, even though the Revenue Secretary, speaking to our colleague, has said they're very confident of being able to achieve April 1, 2017. But this is not going to go down well in its current avatar as is being talked about.
No, cess definitely will not go down well with the industry, and I agree with you that cess was something which was not socialized
cess,
among the general
Hari,
industry
even if we
stakeholder,
talk about
because
the multiplicity of the rate structure?
Multiplicity of the rate structure, I think for some time we all knew there is going to be multiple rate structures. And even if you look at the CA report, it did allude to a multiple rate structure. So multiple rate structure, ideally, you probably would not have wanted a multiple rate structure, but multiple rate structure was at least a reality. We knew that there is going to be rates. We only didn't know whether it's going to be 5 or 4 or 3, but that's a fact that was there on the table for some time. Cess was something which has been a surprise, and the concept of cess being a delta between the current existing rate over and above the 26% was another factor, which means for each item in that 26 rate, you might have different kinds of cesses. Second, how will the cess apply?
Yeah.
Will it lead to cascading? Will it be at one part of the chain? And these are all something which will vitiate the entire structure. And you already have a multiple structure, which means already our GST is going to be far more complicated than what one had envisaged. And then you add a cess to it. I don't think the industry is going to be happy on this cess concept. I was happy to hear Mr. Pandeyarajan say that this is only one of the options, which means I don't think the jury is finally out on the cess. And my hope is the 1 week of deliberation and the feedback they will get from the industry will make them see through as to whether cess is an ideal way to compensate. I do agree to what Sachin said, is that the compensation is not going to be a worry for the center. They will have buoyancy in revenues to sheer compliance, both in GST and income tax. So I'm a little surprised as to why cess is being projected as a compensatory vehicle. I'm a little surprised to hear that.
Okay, let's bring in our team of colleagues who've been on the ground reporting on this story bit by bit. Sapna, one of the options on the table, or is it pretty much a fait accompli as far as the cess imposition is concerned? We've lost that line with Sapna, but we'll go back to her in just a second. But Prateek, let me bring you in, because as we heard there from both the Kerala Finance Minister as well as Mr. Pandeyarajan on the issue of dual control, there still is no clarity. The Kerala Finance Minister seems to suggest that the model that is being proposed is way too complicated, and that is going to be a matter that will be addressed now in the next meeting in the first week of November. Beyond the rate structure, on the issue of dual control, what seems to be the best way forward?
Yes, I mentioned that yesterday, that Centre has a view that all the 11 lakh service tax assessees will be administered by the centres to start with, and as I suspected, the states are not too happy with that, and there was a mention that state authorities in terms of numbers is much more than central authorities. So I think one of the things which Kerala Finance Minister also suggested, that below 1.5 crore of threshold, maybe it can be given to states, but beyond 1.5 crore of threshold, I think dual control is something perhaps we'll have to live with. And while for the service sector it's going to be a problem, but that's a problem inherent with the GST structure, because when you talk about a dual GST, you talk about dual administration as well. So from an industry point of view, they would want one set of authorities, and perhaps what they can consider doing is that while the assessment level can still be done separately by centre and state, but as we move ahead in terms of let's say notices and appeals, etc., one can create a common platform between centre and state so that can be adjudicated faster. But to my mind, on dual control, I think that states will not give it up so easily so as to allow the centre to administer the entire service sector. That I think is unlikely.
Okay, let me go across to Sapna now. She joins us. Sapna, one of the options still on the table, or does it seem like it's pretty much a fait accompli as far as the cess is concerned?
It appears to be a fait accompli, but a caveat here, the formal approval of the GST Council is still awaited. So probably some tweaking in the mechanism may be possible, but the expression of a virtual convergence on the source of funding for state compensation is largely translating into the imposition of a cess. Having said that, top government officials have mentioned the logic, and this is something that CNBC-TV18 has been reporting about. Very clearly, they're using a very basic argument that the tax rates would have to be higher if we do not opt for a cess component to compensate the states. The third aspect that they're talking about is that this money is going to be given completely to the states. It's going to be there for 5 years. It will be phased out after 5 years. And even if the compensation requirements are lower than expected, it's going to be kind of a surplus pool. And states will have every right over that money. So it's not that the center is going to, kind of keep it with itself or use it to correct some fiscal imbalance. Coming back to the rate structure, here the indication is very clear that once the decision, formal note on the cess has been taken, after that the rate structure will be decided. The finance minister probably has kept a small window open here to take in more views of the states on this front. Because, some of the states, especially like Kerala, is very clear that you need to have higher tax rates and not a cess to compensate states. So yes.
No, Sapna, I also wanted to ask you about the manner in which the cess is going to be imposed, because our tax experts sitting with us in the studio have been raising queries on that. Is it going to be different across different categories? Is it going to be only on luxury goods, however those are defined? What are you picking up on the imposition and the manner of the imposition if they finally do decide to go through with the cess?
Well, what we do understand is that the imposition of cess is only going to be in the highest category, that is the 26% slab. And there also there will be a separate categorization of all those, high luxury items, which are very, very expensive. They're totally beyond the reach of the common person. So here again, the twin objective of protecting the revenue base as well as keeping it non-inflationary to the extent possible. So the understanding here probably is, say for example, an SUV, if currently is taxed at 40% in the market and you put it in a 26% slab, so 40 minus 26, whatever is the difference, that may be coming in as a cess. So the current revenue base will also be protected, and in terms of the inflationary impact, the rate will be kept at 26%. So this is what we understand. Hence, various commodities under that slab or wherever the cess is going to be imposed may have various cesses. It's not going to be a one rate.
A single cess. Yeah. All right, Sapna, appreciate you joining us with those details. Our colleague Sapna Das, the first to break this story. Mohandas Pai, you just heard Sapna present the government's point of view and argument for why a cess or a mechanism which involves a cess makes sense. It will protect the revenue base. It will likely be non-inflationary. And look, everybody else around the world has a sin tax. So this is another way of imposing a sin tax by way of a cess. What do you make of that argument?
See, Shireen, if you put tax on cigarettes, alcohol, and one more item is perfectly okay. SUV and definition of luxury goods, something that we have to look. But, these three items, sin tax is okay. But what we need in this country is to create a lower cost base for manufacturing, and autos are certainly a very large part of the manufacturing. Much of the components that you make for everything else goes into autos. So I think they should bring it down and reduce that whole thing, and it creates confusion. See, my plea is wait for 2 years for the entire thing to play out. If you fear anything about compensation, don't put the cess, don't mess it around. Create a kitty out of borrowing and give it to them. You may not even need to borrow. What I worry about from what Sapna says is, tomorrow there's a surplus and no compensation to be given, it becomes an extra source of revenue. So you're levying more tax than what is necessary. You're creating a high-cost economy. You're messing up the entire structure and complicating it, leading to more dispute. There is no upside. We have to lower our cost base by making sure the entire chain is taxed. We have to be reasonable and not make it too complex. So cess should be out, and if there's at all a gap, fund it by borrowing for 2 years, or even after a year when you play it out.
Mr. Pai, just hang on for 1 second. We're now being joined by Captain Abhimanyu, representing the state of Haryana in the GST Council. Captain Abhimanyu, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Sir, if I could first start by asking you to explain to us what the finance minister seems to suggest. There has been virtual convergence on the compensating mechanism, and we are given to understand that most states seem to be in favor, or at least okay in principle, with the idea of an imposition of a cess. Can you confirm that to us?
Yes, that is one idea which most of the states have finally concurred upon. And let me just share with you, Shireen, that the entire atmosphere in GST Council in the last 2 days had been very congenial, and most of the issues have been discussed there, and the decisions are being taken on the consensus basis. As far as this imposition of cess is concerned, the basic guiding principle that we have kept in mind while even discussing about GST rate structures and the bands is that the current taxation, the cumulative effect of the center as well as state, after the GST comes into effect, the effective rate must be lower than the existing cumulative rate. So we have to keep in mind the overall manufacturing, also the industry, and of course the consumers, and as well as we have to make sure that the states do not suffer any revenue losses after the GST comes into effect. So we're trying to create a win-win situation.
So, Captain Abhimanyu, given that driving principle that you just articulated for us, can you explain to us then how this cess is likely to be imposed? We believe that it is only going to be imposed on categories that fall under the 26% bracket. But what was the discussion on the number of items and the quantum of the cess that's likely to be imposed? Will it be different on different items?
Yes, Shireen, I won't be able to commit the rate structure as suggested, the 26%, because it is yet to be decided. But going by your figure and assuming that it is going to be 26%, now all the items, for example, the high-end luxury items and the tobacco products and the other demerit goods, now whatever tax rate, cumulative, effective tax rate that they are attracting today. So it is, including the cess, it is going to be somewhere near that and possibly lower than the current rate. So now in whatever additionality over 26%, or the figure that you've quoted, over 26%, which is today effective, this can be put up in the form of a cess. Now this collection will go into a particular account from wherein the states will be compensated, those states which are falling short of their revenue estimates, the projected growth. So the entire compensation formula has been worked out. The compensation mechanism has been discussed and almost decided upon. So, but also, as I confirmed to you, that whatever additionality in the form of cess will be imposed, it should be, it will not be more than the current effective rate for sure.
So would it be fair then, Captain Abhimanyu, for us to say that pending a formal nod of the GST Council has in principle given approval to the imposition of a cess on luxury items, on demerit goods?
Yes, in a way. We try to discuss various options other than this imposition of cess or going in for a higher rate, higher range rate, but we didn't want to add too many rate structures at the same time. And since this is going to be a transitionary arrangement for 5 years, so the best option was that these cesses, the different revenues that are already accruing to the center as well as the states, they will be passed on to this cess fund. There's no additional levy, there's no additional tax, there is nothing in addition to what is happening today that will be levied. So this is just simple passing on.
But Captain Abhimanyu, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but we've got a panel of about 6 or 7 tax experts who are sitting here with us and representatives of industry with us in the studio. And the consensus, at least within industry and tax experts, is that the very idea and the notion of the imposition of a cess is opposite to the idea of the GST itself. In fact, it's a retrograde move. It's a step in the wrong direction. Can you explain to us whether there was any argument that was presented on the complication that will follow because of the imposition of cess, and was it the centre that pretty much has tried to convince states to come on board with taking the cess route?
See, we respect, and I personally respect the opinion of every expert sitting here. But at the same time, when you're sitting there in the GST Council, you have to take decisions. And all these possible possible impact on the GST regime as such were discussed, and we wanted to keep it as neat, as clean, as simple, with minimum of distortions as possible. But since this compensation formula had to be worked out, and we did try to discuss various other permutation combinations, but nothing was more simpler and neater and cleaner than this. And this is the reason that we had to go in for this additional imposition of cess. And at the same time, these revenues are already coming in, and they're only getting subsumed. And to ensure that this compensation is made, we had to increase the highest slab, highest rate to a level which probably was not the best option in the mind of most of the members. And we didn't want to create any cascading impact on the inflation, and also did not really want to impact the industry and the manufacturing, for example, the high-end luxury cars or the white goods and other. We didn't want to adversely impact them. So this is the best
My final question,
that we could pick up.
So you believe that this is the best option forward. My final question to you, Captain Abhimanyu, if there is a finality on the imposition of a cess to fund the compensation, then why didn't we arrive at a consensus on the rate structure? Because that, now I understand, is going to be taken up on the meeting on the 3rd and the 4th. So what's holding back the finalization of the rate structure, sir? Where was the disagreement? Your question itself speaks volume of the environment in which GST is working. We are discussing everything and every possible, even as far as the imposition of cess is concerned. There were 5-6 different alternatives were discussed, but ultimately we had to decide upon it. So it's taking a lot of time, but the overall intent is to arrive at a consensus, and we do not have any dissent whatsoever. And if at all there is a different voice, we would like to discuss and deliberate upon it and then conclude. This is exactly what Union Finance Minister had been trying in last 3 meetings, and these 2 days meeting that we had, we've just finished today. So I'm sure in the next 2 meetings we should be able to decide upon the rate structures and the dual empowerment issues also. All right, Captain Abhimanyu, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. Thanks very much for taking time out to speak with us. That is the representative on the GST Council from the state of Haryana, confirming the CNBC TV18 news break. It is a fait accompli. There will be an imposition of cess. Let me just get our panel of experts to get in their reactions to what they just heard. Mohandas Pai, let me start by asking you, you just heard Captain Abhimanyu. Very categorically, they're stating that pending a formal nod from the GST Council, most states have converged on the idea of the imposition of a cess.
I think it's led by the government of India and the finance minister. At least the finance minister should tell us, as citizens of this country and industry, what is the likely shortage if you don't have a cess? What is it they fear? Is it 20,000 crores, 30,000 crores, 5 lakh crores, 3 lakh crores, 2 lakh crores? Let's get a figure out of him. And the figure is large enough. Maybe industry can also set the solution. Now there is no certainty about the figure. There is no modeling. There is no simulation. We don't know. Just to want a cess. Why mess up the whole thing by putting a cess? We don't know the quantum. What do they estimate? Let them study, make a model and give us the estimate. If it's going to be 2 lakh crores, it's better to increase the rate. If it's going to be 30,000 crores, 40,000 crores, it's better to borrow money and give it and see what happens after 1 year. Raise the top rate to 30% from 26%. Simple, easy, clean. Make it very clean. Why have this cess and say it'll be there for 5 years, 6 years? Create a surplus there. We're going to give it to the states again. And again is a mess. We go back to the same old mess of a very contrived, bad system without full follow-through. Too much of litigation. We don't know what happens. And maybe evasion will also come. So I think they must think it through and come with data and decide themselves. It's very disappointing about the cess issue without proper data.
Okay, let's bring in Hasib Drabu, the Finance Minister of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. He also joins us here on CNBC-TV18 live and exclusive. Mr. Drabu, thanks very much. We've been speaking with state finance ministers and there seems to be, at least from tax experts and industry, a backlash on the possibility of a cess being imposed. But our sense is, while speaking with various finance ministers, that it is pretty much a done deal that the compensation will be funded by way of a cess. Can you confirm that to us?
Yes, I mean, the estimates that were given that the need for compensation is about 50,000 crores. There has to be a source of funding, and part funding of that would be through cess on different items, which include the environment cess on coal and lignite, and some other items as well. So cess as a means of funding, it's not quite a done deal, but yes, I think there's a large amount of consensus now on that because some states did express reservations on the fact that how could you use cess as a means of funding, because it makes it self-compensatory. It comes out of GST itself. And an implication of the fact that you're trying to fund it through cess is that the rates will rise. So the expectation by and large had been that this would come out of the Consolidated Fund of India, as it had happened in the case of VAT. But given the magnitudes are large, it doesn't seem to be possible for the Government of India to fund it through the Consolidated Fund from their own resources.
Mr. Drabu, let's just go over the maths, and this is something that our experts have also been raising questions on. You said the centre spoke of 50,000 crore rupees, which is what is needed in terms of compensation. They talked about the environment cess, which, if one goes by the budget, was factored in at about 26,000 crores. So it's the shortfall that the government is hoping to bridge by way of the cess?
No, this cess itself, this coal environment cess itself is a cess, right? So then you can have a competition fund. Will be, so the cess revenue will get into the competition fund now, and you could impose cess on some other luxury goods. You could impose it on other items as well. You could do it,
What are the other items that were discussed from a cess perspective, sir? I mean, tobacco and alcohol is the... Okay.
Aerated water, luxury motor vehicles, you can have tobacco. Those are the main items that are being considered for levy of cess. It's not about so much what you levy it on. I mean, partly yes, to some extent that is there, but it's also that as a matter of principle, you want to use cess as a mode of funding compensation, because this cess is already being levied in some cases by states. So why do you want to take it away from them and give their money to them? So to say, taking from one and giving the other. But I think we are getting down to a consensus because there are not too many sources of funding this.
Okay, so you're saying that there is almost consensus, which is what everyone else who's been speaking to us has alluded to as well, on the imposition of a cess. You talked about pan masala, aerated water, luxury cars, as some of the categories where we are likely to see the imposition of a cess. But on the rate structure itself, Mr. Drabu, can you throw some light on where the discussion currently stands? Because the Finance Minister said very clearly that the compensation mechanism is linked to the finalization of the rate structure. So I'm guessing that once the GST Council formally approves the levy of the cess, we will finalize the rate structure as well.
Yes, I mean, I think the big takeaway, which one is not really kind of, I don't know if I haven't tracked the media, is that there has been a movement away from this one rate to bands of 4 rates, right? 4 rates now. We are talking about 6%, 12%, 18%, 26% plus. So the idea really seems to be, as it's emerging, is that you're trying to make a transition from the current rate structure to the GST rates. So you have a lower rate at 6%, you have a standard 1 rate at 12%, you have a standard rate 2 at 18%, and you have a higher rate at 26%. So those are the 4 rates, and depending on how the compensation gets funded, the rates will get recalibrated, because there is an intrinsic link between the cess and the rate. The fact that the cess is being funded from GST itself means it will have an impact on the rate.
So you believe that on the 3rd, when the GST Council meets, we could get clarity and finalize on both the levy of the cess as well as the final structure of the rates?
Yes, I think so. In fact, I think it's important to point out that the whole sense of the House or the tonality of the debates is very, very interesting and non-acrimonious. Genuinely looking at numbers, data, because the other issue we discussed today was about dual control, which is now being redesigned as empowerment, cross-empowerment. How many traders will get covered and so on and so forth. So I think if you sit in through the meetings, and it's not that the GST Council has not been able to take decisions, but I think a lot of discussion is happening. Some of it very, very meaningful discussions coming from different perspectives. Different states have different, designs, economic structures, trade brackets. So to put together 30 states into one format, uniform, and it needs to be appreciated that every single decision taken so far has been with consensus. There's been no dissent, so to say. It's quite interesting to see how consensus is emerging. So I would be pretty certain that by the end of the next round of discussions, we should have consensus on both the cross-empowerment / dual control issues as well as the rate structure.
Mr. Drabu, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks very much for joining us. Hasib Drabu, the Finance Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, there confirming what we have been reporting. Sachin Menon, let me bring you in. We were still hoping that maybe this was not a done deal, but it seems fairly evident now that it is.
Well, if it is a fait accompli, nothing more industry can do about it. The only thing is that the pressure on the IT structure and figuring out how you'll be in a position to provide for the better infrastructure to levy this. And this also complicate the structure depending upon what point of sale this cess is going to be levied, whether it is every point of sale or is the last point of sale. So the devil is in the detail. We have to wait and see that how it is emerging. And the multiple rate structure which we talked about have its own impact, especially from the perspective of classification. If some of the similar goods are falling in different brackets, then the classification disputes that. The main purpose of limiting the rate slabs was to reduce the litigation which is happening today. So essentially, if you're looking at a good structure, perhaps a structure where the slab rates are lesser and there is no cess or any other kind of levies, that would have been the best structure we could have expected from a best GST structure. But having said this, I don't think that if the intention is to generate revenue for compensation, perhaps this cess may not have been imposed, because even otherwise government would have mopped up the revenue by buoyancy in income tax and GST revenue itself. So therefore, if it is fait accompli, we have to comply with that. But from our perspective, I feel that perhaps it could have been better.
All right, Mohan, you wanted to come in on what you just heard so far.
Yeah, Shireen, let me give some data, Shireen. The total tax collection of the states and the center is 18% of GDP. Direct taxes plus customs maybe 8%. So we are talking about 10% of GDP. 10% of GDP today is about 15 lakh crores, because GDP is 1 crore 50 lakh crores. It's 15 lakh crores. And it's 50,000 crore potential loss. It's just 3.5%. It's neither here nor there. And if you just levy cess on alcohol, on cigarettes and maybe one other item, then you could generate maybe 10-15,000 crores. You're looking at 30-40,000 crores. It could be an accounting error. And 30-40,000 crores is 0.2% of GDP. So why put this cess and mess it up? Leave it open for a year and maybe make the 26%, 30% and leave it at that. Complete it. Don't put the cess. Don't complicate matters. That is our request. The data is very clear.
Okay, that's the request. That's the request from industry. Wrap-up comments. Hari, let me start by asking you for your wrap-up comments. And if government is listening, what's your plea?
Well, what I'm surprised is that if all the ministers who came out and gave sound bites are saying that there was a near consensus on cess, and if it appears to be a fait accompli, then why was the rate structure not decided today? So there is something that is still there. And we are still living on hope as an industry and as a design concept. But maybe, I don't know, there's something there, because they could have easily come up and said if there was a virtual consensus on cess as the only compensatory mechanism for this number of 50,000 crores, which I agree to Mr. Pai, is a pretty small number in comparison to the grand scheme of things, then I really don't understand why the consensus was not arrived on rate structure today. So there is something that is missing, but yes, directionally it seems to be cess, which I am sure from a design perspective is not something that will be welcomed by the industry. And the whole concept, I allude to what Mr. Pai said, the whole concept of luxury items, it's itself going through a change in an aspirational India where we speak about demographic dividends of youngsters. So I don't know, with an ad valorem concept, you really start doing this optical social tweaks, and then you really complicate the whole structure. So in my view, let's wait till third and fourth. But yeah.
Let's wait till the third and fourth. But Pratik, your final thoughts on what you've heard?
No, I'm very much disappointed as other panelists. I think I just do hope that cess is not a fait accompli. I think industry would raise a very strong demand that cess should not be there. Yesterday we saw UP minister arguing that there might not be any loss for the states. So I agree with Mr. Pai that why do we want to preempt and assume that there is a loss? And if we're talking about 0.2% of the GDP, and we are saying that 1 to 2% will be a growth in GDP because of GST coming in, where would the need of compensation be? So I think it's good for the government to wait for a year or two and then decide on this. And cess, as everybody has said, will complicate, and we don't want a situation where industry comes back and says that if this is the structure and this is so much of complication has been created, really do we really need GST in this country? So I think one just hopes that the government takes all of these things into account and perhaps revisits the decision which seems to have been taken today.
All right, and Nihal Singh, I'll give you the final word on this discussion. You've heard our panelists, you've heard the finance ministers, you've heard the finance minister at the centre, you've heard from the revenue secretary. Final words with you.
Yeah, Shirid, I feel that the ideal situation should be that only two rate structure and no cess, but we are hoping too much about that. So therefore, to at least have a minimum rate structure is a better than actually just not leaving the cess, because cess will be only on few thin items. That is what we could understand. But rather than having a tradable item which goes into supply chain, and there if the rate are increased, it will have more inflationary impact, and also it will affect the demand for those goods. And today you say luxury item is X, and tomorrow it may become a common item, like say white goods are used in even the middle class and lower class people with the gas going into the villages. So if on that higher rate is levied, that is much more worse than getting a cess on say tobacco product.
Absolutely. Are we tying ourselves up in all kinds of knots is the question. Is this a step forward or two steps back? At least consensus on the panel certainly seems to be that this is a retrograde move and a complicated move that the government should try and avert and avoid. Mohandas Pai, Hari, Pratik, Mr. Singh and Sachin, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. Remember, you heard it first here on the channel from the government and from various state finance ministers on the mechanism that is likely to be finalized when the GST Council meets again on the 3rd and 4th of November. We'll be tracking the action as we have. For now, thanks for watching.